He didn't know that picking up a stranger's diary would unravel 12 years of regret. Jackson Hayes was 34 years old and worth billions, and every Thursday morning he sat at the same corner table in the same quiet Portland cafe, because here nobody asked him for anything. Mia, the barista, set down his usual order, black Americano, avocado toast, and nodded toward a forgotten item on the table. Someone had left the diary behind. Worn burgundy cover, a frayed ribbon for a bookmark, the kind of thing that's been loved, not just owned. He told himself he was only checking for a name, so he could return it. Then he opened the cover and saw the handwriting, and his hands actually started to shake. Property of Abigail Bennett. 12 years. 12 years since he'd let her walk out of his life, so he could chase a startup in San Francisco. 12 years since she'd warned him, almost like a prophecy, that his ambition would make him rich and leave him empty. And now her diary was sitting in his hands. He knew he should stop. He didn't. He flipped through page after page, sketches, quotes, private reflections, until one entry stopped him cold. She'd seen him, recently, right here in Portland. Spotted Jackson at Pioneer Square yesterday. He didn't see me. Is exactly as I imagined. Successful, powerful, untouchable. The boy who once promised me the moon now owns the rockets to get there. Some promises are better left broken. His chest tightened. She was back. The woman who had been his entire moral compass in college. The one who saw past his potential straight to the cracks underneath. And she was back in his city, and she thought he was untouchable. Mia leaned in. Someone left that earlier. Pretty girl, auburn hair, said she might come back for it. Jackson's pulse spiked. Auburn hair. Freckles. That was her. He should have handed it over right then. Instead, he kept reading, and what he found broke something open in him. Abigail had moved back to take a job as creative director at a small publishing house. She'd just ended a relationship. She was rebuilding her life around something she called Project Phoenix, and underneath every professional update was a current of old pain that had never quite healed. One line gutted him. Success means different things to different people. For some, it's a bank account with many zeros. For others, it's waking up next to someone who makes your heart feel full. Jackson chose his definition. I chose mine. He sat there with his coffee going cold, realizing that while he'd built an empire, he'd never once stopped to ask what it had cost him. His last relationship had ended 6 months earlier with the same old accusation, emotionally unavailable. Always, and now, in her own handwriting, was proof that he'd been hollowing himself out since the day he let her go. Then he found the entry that changed everything. Abigail had been invited to the Hammond Foundation Gala, the same gala Jackson attended every single year as a major donor. This Saturday, the universe had just handed him a door, and for the first time in years, he had no idea what was on the other side of it. Hook, 3-minute mark. He had a diary. He knew where she'd be in 5 days. And he still hadn't decided whether to do the right thing or the thing that would let him see her again. The cafe door chimed, and Jackson's breath caught. Abigail Bennett was standing at the counter, more beautiful than memory had any right to preserve, asking me about a missing diary. In a moment of pure panic, he shoved the journal into his briefcase. He wasn't ready. Not without a plan. Not without knowing what he'd even say after 12 years of silence. She turned. Their eyes met across the room, and in Hayes, just for a second, he saw something he couldn't quite name. Weariness, maybe, or resolve. Then she was walking straight toward him. Jackson Hayes, she said, voice steadier than his heartbeat, of all the coffee shops in Portland. Abby, he said, and the old nickname slipped out before he could stop it. It's Abigail now. Gentle, but firm. No one's called me Abby in years. She glanced at the table. I left my journal here. Have you seen it? It was sitting 2 feet away from her, inside his briefcase. He looked her in the eye and lied. I haven't, but I'll keep an eye out. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment. Maybe. And she gave him her number through Mia and walked away. As she did, Jackson made a decision that surprised even him. He wasn't going to lose her again. Not without trying. I won't lose you this time, he whispered to himself, and started planning for Saturday. For the next 2 days, he barely put the diary down. Each page revealed more of the woman she'd become. Resilient, Sharp, still carrying that creative fire he'd fallen for in college. One recent entry stopped him. Project Phoenix was a planned series of books about women history had erased. Scientists, leaders, artists who'd changed the world and got to no credit for it. Dad would have been proud, she'd written. Jackson remembered her father, a history professor who died while they were still in college. A lost Jackson had failed her on, choosing an investor meeting over being there for her grief. That wound, he realized now, might have been the first crack in everything that followed. Back in his penthouse, his assistant Tara ran through his schedule. Hammond confirmed your table for Saturday. The usual 8 seats, filled them with a business crowd. No, Jackson said. Just me. I'm going alone. Tara raised an eyebrow. He never went anywhere alone, and Jackson asked her to quietly dig up everything she could on a small publishing house called Monarch, and specifically on something called Project Phoenix. By Friday, he had his answer. Monarch had vision but no money. They were exactly the kind of company a predator would circle. And Abigail's dream project was sitting right in the crosshays. That night he dreamed of the day she left him. Boxes half-packed, her voice breaking. This isn't about San Francisco. It's about priorities. You didn't even discuss it with me. In the dream, he ran after her. In real life, 12 years ago, he hadn't. He'd let pride keep his feet planted, certain she'd come around to his ambition eventually. By the time he understood his mistake, her number was disconnected and she was gone. He woke up Saturday with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Tonight, he'd return the diary, confess everything, and whatever came next, he'd offer to fund Project Phoenix with no strings attached, not to win her back, but because the work deserved to exist. Hook, 8-minute mark. He thought honesty would be the hardest part of tonight. He had no idea a rival billionaire was about to make it so much worse. The Hammond Gala lit up the Portland Art Museum like something out of a dream, and Jackson found Abigail almost immediately. Forest green gown, auburn hair catching the light, deep in conversation with Walter Kingsley, CEO of a rival tech company. Jackson caught the tail end of it. Kingsley was pitching exclusive digital rights to Phoenix. Abigail was pushing back hard. These stories belonged in print, in libraries, accessible to everyone, not locked behind a paywall. Kingsley smiled like a man who'd already won. Admirable ideals, but ideals don't pay printing costs. You look beautiful tonight, Jackson said, stepping in and immediately regretting the word when her expression iced over. What do you want, Jackson? He pulled the diary from his jacket. I should have given you this at the cafe. I'm sorry. Her eyes went wide. You had it the entire time? Why would you lie? Because I read your name and I couldn't stop myself. I read some of it. Enough to know I owe you an apology that's 12 years late. Her face flushed with fury. Betrayal, violation, all of it justified. That's exactly something the old Jackson would do, she said. Take what he wants and never think about who it hurts. You're right, he said quietly. But I'd like the chance to prove I've changed. Or that I'm trying to. She crossed her arms. By eavesdropping on my business meeting, swooping in to play a hero against Kingsley, I don't need saving. Jackson, my life isn't a story where the billionaire X shows up to fix everything. Project Phoenix deserves to exist exactly how you imagined it, he said. I'd like to help. No strings. Not to win you back, just because the work matters. She studied him, unconvinced, and he played the only card he had. He quoted her own words back to her, an entry where she'd written that real change isn't grand gestures, it's consistent action over time. Her breath caught. You really did read it. I did, and I'll understand if you never want to see me again. But if you're willing, I'd like to talk about how I can support Phoenix without controlling it. A server passed with champagne. She took a glass just to have a second to breathe. You know what's ironic? She said finally. I told myself for years that if I ever saw you again, I'd feel nothing. And I was wrong. I feel everything. Anger, disappointment, curiosity, and something else I'm not ready to name yet. Before he could respond, a colleague pulled her away for a donor introduction. As she left, she pressed a card into his hand. Monday, my office, 2 o'clock. Come with ideas, not just money. Then, quieter, and Jackson, no more reading my diary. Watching her walk away, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, Hope with absolutely no guarantee attached to it. For the first time in his adult life, he couldn't buy his way to an outcome. He'd have to earn it. Monday came with rare Portland sunshine. Jackson showed up to Monarch's offices early. No assistant, no entourage, just a portfolio of real proposals, because he wanted her to see he wasn't hiding behind money this time. Inside, Abigail sat beside Gregory Walsh, Monarch's founder, who greeted Jackson like a man who already smelled a payday. For 30 minutes, Abigail laid out Phoenix in full, 12 volumes on women erased from history. Her passion was unmistakable. Jackson presented 3 different partnership structures, each one designed to protect her creative control. She visibly didn't expect that. "You actually prepared real proposals," she said, flipping through them. "I half expected a blank check and a thank you card." "The old me might have brought that," he admitted. "I'm trying to respect what you've actually built here." Then Gregory returned, with Walter Kingsley in tow. "Didn't want to be inefficient," Kingsley said smoothly, sitting down uninvited. He'd made Monarch a formal acquisition offer. Abigail's pen went rigid in her hand. This was news to her, too. Kingsley's pitch was simple: full integration into his platform, generous money, and the quiet death of everything that made Phoenix Phoenix. Jackson pushed back, but the damage was already done. Abigail had just learned, in real time, that the man who'd hired her might be selling her dream out from under her. In the elevator afterward, her composure cracked. "He promised me creative control. He never even mentioned Kingsley's offer." "Founders panic when the money runs low," Jackson said gently. "I almost sold my own company once, year 3, when things got desperate." "What stopped you?" "Remembering why I started in the first place." They ended up at a quiet cafe around the corner, and for the first time in 12 years, they just talked, really talked. About her father, about the history he'd taught her to chase, about the entry she'd written, that true change is consistent action, not grand gestures, and why those words had lodged themselves so deep in Jackson that he couldn't shake them. His phone kept buzzing with Tara's urgent messages. He silenced it without looking. Abigail noticed. Then her own phone rang, and her face fell. "Gregory, emergency board meeting." Kingsley had come back with a higher offer, and Gregory wanted to take it. "Everything I built," she said, gathering her things, voice shaking, "reduced the content for somebody's subscription platform." "Let me come with you," Jackson said. "I can counter the offer right now." "No. Sharp. Final. This isn't your battle, Jackson. You always need control things, fix things, be the smartest person in the room. Some things don't change." It stung because it was true. "You're right about who I was," he said. "But this isn't control. This is believing in you." She paused at the door, and he called after her, one more line from her diary, about her father trusting her to keep his books, his stories, alive. "This is the same thing. Abigail, don't let them take this from you." She looked back at him, something shifting behind her eyes. "You really did read every page, didn't you? Enough to know Phoenix isn't just a project. It's a promise. To your father, to yourself, to every woman history forgot." She left without answering, and Jackson stood there facing the hardest decision of his life: respect her wishes and do nothing, or go full billionaire and crush Kingsley's offer without asking her. One choice might save Phoenix. The other might cost him her. Forever. 3 days of silence followed. 3 days where Jackson barely functioned, staring out his office windows toward Monarch's building, missing half of what people said to him in meetings. Tara finally snapped. "Fix it or delegate it. You built an empire on decisions, not moping." That night, alone in his penthouse, 2 documents sat on his coffee table. One was a full acquisition offer that would crush Kingsley and take Phoenix by force, the old Jackson's move. The other was a simple investment offer, no control, no leverage, just support, the man he was trying to become. His phone rang. "Abigail, I need to see you," she said. "Are you home?" 40 minutes later, she was pacing his living room, composure completely gone. The board voted to accept Kingsley's offer. Papers signed Monday. Phoenix would survive, barely, gutted into digital-only content, stretched over 3 years, with Abigail demoted to an advisor with no real say. Kingsley had actually told her she should be grateful they were keeping the project at all. "That's not right," Jackson said quietly. You deserve better. Phoenix deserves better. That's why I'm here, she said. I need your help. On my terms. She'd spent 3 days quietly lining up authors and illustrators ready to follow her, not Monarch. She wanted to walk away and build something entirely her own, but she needed a partner who understood both the money and the mission. You're asking me to be that partner. With conditions. Her eyes held his, steady and unflinching. 1. Real partnership. You bring capital. I keep total creative control. 2. We build a foundation so these books reach every school and library, no matter their budget. 3. She hesitated, and for just a second the businesswoman fell away. We keep our history, and whatever might come next between us, completely separate from this company. Whatever happens, or doesn't happen, between us, Phoenix survives it. I agree to all 3, he said, with one amendment. She tensed, just that we don't pretend our history doesn't exist. We don't have to let it run things, but we don't erase it either. She exhaled, and something in her shoulders let go. I can accept that. Then we have a deal. He offered his hand. She took it, and it felt heavier than any contract he'd ever signed in his life. They spent the entire weekend building it from nothing. A new company, Phoenix Rising Press, Jackson's capital matched against Abigail's vision and her team. Somewhere between the business plans, the personal wall started coming down too. She told him about a failed engagement in New York to a man who couldn't handle her ambition. He told her about his sister's cancer diagnosis and how it had quietly forced him to question every choice he'd made chasing success. By Sunday night, they had a full legal framework ready for Monday morning, and Abigail was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'm trying to reconcile the Jackson I knew with the man sitting in front of me, she admitted. You've changed. I've grown, he said. The core's the same, just better calibrated. Is that why you didn't go behind my back and outbid Kingsley yourself? The old you would have. He smiled, a little rueful. I considered it, had the papers drawn up. He nodded at the documents still on the table. Some wins aren't worth what they cost. She picked up both versions, the takeover and the partnership, and looked at him for a long moment. You chose respect over control. I chose you, he said simply. Your vision, your terms, and whatever happens next, I'm proud of that. Monday morning, they walked into Monarch together. The room had gathered to finalize Kingsley's acquisition and froze the second Abigail announced her resignation and her counteroffer. Gregory's face cycled through shock and pure calculation as he realized 2 billionaires were now bidding against each other for his company. Kingsley wasn't nearly as composed. This is sabotage, he snapped at Jackson. You're only doing this because of some old relationship. I'm doing this because Phoenix is revolutionary, Jackson said evenly, and because Abigail Bennett is the only person in this room who actually understands that. You saw a content acquisition. We see something that actually matters. The meeting dragged on for hours. In the end, Monarch took Kingsley's money, but with one non-negotiable amendment. Project Phoenix would be spun off as its own independent company under Abigail's full leadership, with publishing rights belonging entirely to her. Outside on the sidewalk, sunlight hitting the city, Abigail turned to Jackson, practically glowing. We did it. You did it, he corrected. I just wrote checks. Partners give each other what the other one needs, she said, taking his hand. I needed your resources. You needed someone to remind you that success was never about the acquisition. He laced his fingers through haze, feeling something settle into place after 12 long years of not quite knowing what was missing. What happens now? He asked. She reached up and kissed him, soft and sure. Now, she said, we build something meaningful. Together. And as they walked away from a building that had almost cost them everything, Jackson thought about a worn burgundy diary left behind on a cafe table, the diary that had handed him not just a story, but the rest of theirs. I won't lose you this time, he promised himself the night he found it. Standing there with her hand in his, he finally believed it. This time, they wouldn't just live the story. They'd write it themselves.